To be back with you, and I hope it'll continue into the future. I wanted to begin by asking a really simple question. Most of these kinds of questions are so simple as to be stupid, and this one probably applies, but I just want a yes or a no answer.
Okay.
How many people in the room believe in God? How many people in the room don't believe in God?
God bless you.
And how many people
Are not sure.
I'm not going there. How many people who raise their hands as believing in God would call themselves religious? And how many people who raise their hands as not believing in God would call themselves an atheist? Okay. Finally, how many people in the room know what the Talmud is?
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of. So okay. So just to, for those few who don't, the Talmud is a multi-volume, like 70-volume series of books that were codified in the 5th century under the reign of Judah the Prince, Judah Hanasi, which consisted of dialogues of all the rabbis across several generations about the Torah, about the law, about stories about the Torah and about the law, about common wisdom, and so on. Not that well organized, but organized into books and sections, and really normative Judaism as we practice it or as we know it is much more connected to the Talmud than it is to the Torah, to the Bible. The Bible tells the fundamental stories. The Talmud breaks it out into this is what you should do with your lives. So the Talmud is a very authoritative source, and there are two of them. There was one compiled in Jerusalem. There was one compiled in Babylon. The one in Babylon is much more extant. We have more of it than the Jerusalem Talmud, and is considered more authoritative, even though there are not that many contradictions between the two. So there's the Jerusalem Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, and here we go. What struck me as an atheist who nevertheless has spent a lot of my professional life and intellectual life exploring Judaism and Jewish peoplehood, and was the encounter with an atheist in the Talmud who was preserved, who was recorded and preserved in the Talmud. And I always wondered, how come? Given how much of the dialogue in the Talmud, which is among real people, it's not like, you know, who knows about Abraham and Sarah and Jacob and so on, whether they ever lived. But the rabbis dialoguing in the Talmud were real figures of whom there's historical evidence, most of them killed under Roman rule during the uprisings against Rome. And I wondered why the compilers of these many volumes kept this figure. So I'm going to read to you an article from a book. This is the advertisement part of the discussion. The book is called Pinko Jew, Jewish Identity and Progressive Politics, which is a kind of compendium of my writing and artworks and so on as editor of Jewish Currents and Beyond. I also brought two other books. The Tree Jumped, The River Ran Backwards, which is a bunch of Talmudic stories for children. In case you have grandchildren who you would interest in this, I'd say it's good for ages 7 to 12. And finally, my new novel, Hyman, which I had the last time I spoke here, about an 83-year-old charismatic rabbi running into a lot of trouble. It's just written up in the chronogram. They gave it just a great paragraph that describes it perfectly. All of these books, I'm only charging $10 for any one of them, which is way off the cover price, because I really do want to empty my shelves, and I think you'll enjoy them. So feel free afterwards to take a look. The Talmud's atheist. One Sabbath afternoon, some 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya was studying Torah when he looked up and saw a man climbing a palm tree. The fellow had apparently spotted some birds' nests and was breaking the Sabbath law to raid them. He seized both a fledgling and its mother, another violation of halacha, Jewish law, which commands hunters to let mother birds go free. And then he clambered down safely and hurried off with his prizes. Hours later, after the Sabbath had ended, Elisha again looked up to see another man approaching the same stand of trees. This man, too, climbed and took a young bird from its nest, but shooed the mother away. As he descended, he was bitten by a deadly snake, and by the time he reached the ground, the venom had done its work.
Good.
Elisha was horrified. He knew by heart the text about bird catchers in Deuteronomy, which was unambiguous, quote, "Let the mother go and take only the young, that you may fare well and have a long life." That's a direct quote from Deuteronomy. How could it be that God, the supposed author of that text, had struck down the pious one and allowed the lawbreaker to escape? These events triggered a crisis of faith in Elisha that plunged him into heresy and sin. On a subsequent Sabbath, he went out and beckoned to a prostitute. Up close, she recognized her customer and hesitated. "Aren't you Elisha ben Avuya the sage?" He responded by pulling a radish from a furrow, a blatant Sabbath violation, pull plants on the Sabbath, and handing it to the woman. Clearly, she concluded, he is Acher, another. Known ever after as Acher, Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya was a Tana, one of the Jewish religious authorities of the 1st and 2nd centuries. He lived in the valley of Gennesar, not far from Tiberias on the Sea of Galilee, and is named in the Talmud as a young contemporary of such luminaries as Akiva and Tarfon. The latter, Rabbi Tarfon, is often quoted by political activists for saying, "It's not your job to finish the task, but you're not free to desist from it." Famous quote from the Talmud. Acher's best-known student was Rabbi Meir, who maintained a devotion to his teacher long after Acher became an outcast. Acher's actual teachings are very little quoted, but he's portrayed as a savvy interpreter of Scripture and as a man marked for divine punishment. Passages in both the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmud describe him riding a horse through the marketplace in violation of the Sabbath and conducting a debate with his student Meir in an affectionate, wistful tone, as translated in the Book of Legends. This is a book by Bialik and Ravnitsky, goes back to 1905 or so, which organizes the Talmud in English, later translation, in a way that's, I don't read either Hebrew or Aramaic, so I would have no access to the Talmud without books like the Book of Legends. Elisha asks, "What other verse did you expound?" to Rabbi Meir, who says, "Gold and glass cannot equal it," which is from the book of Job. Elisha said, "What did you say about it?" Rabbi Meir, "These are the words of Torah. They are as difficult to acquire as vessels of gold, and are as readily destroyed as vessels of glass." Elisha, "By God, even as readily as earthenware vessels. But your teacher Akiva would not have spoken thus. He would have said, as vessels of gold and even vessels of glass can be repaired if broken, so can a disciple of the wise recover his learning if it has disintegrated." It doesn't matter what you make of that passage. Following this exchange, Meir begs his teacher to end his sinning and become again a disciple of the wise, in quotes. Even when Acher makes the effort, however, bad omens pursue him and bar his way to teshuvah, repentance. Visiting a variety of schools with Meir, Acher is confronted again and again by children quoting verses about evil doing. One of them even mispronounces the phrase "Vela Rasha" and "unto the wicked" to sound like "Vela Elisha" and "unto Elisha." In other words, conflating the name of this rabbi, this heretic, with the word evil. Or the wicked, rather. Despite Meir's loyal efforts to bring his teacher back into the Jewish fold, the heavens seem arrayed against Elisha ben Avuya, Acher. What was the nature of Acher's heresy? The Talmud observes disapprovingly that he was a student of Greek music and philosophy, that he read forbidden books, that he would discourage young students from pursuing scholarship by urging them to do something worldly like acquiring a craft. The Palestinian Talmud also charges him with betraying Jewish leaders to the Roman authorities during the reign of Hadrian, whose persecutions triggered the Bar Kokhba revolt in 132 CE. Quote, some say, reports another passage in the Talmud, that Acher became a heretic, quote, when he saw a pig dragging along in its mouth the tongue of Rabbi Hutzpit, the interpreter, the eldest of 10 rabbis who the Midrash says were murdered by Hadrian. Hutzpit is best known for explaining the language of Torah to the common people. Populist rabbi. This passage makes no suggestion of betrayal or guilt on Acher's part, only shock at seeing the tongue of an eloquent rabbi in the maw of a pig. These not quite credible details aside, the story of Acher is that of a man who becomes an atheist by witnessing injustice in our world. The promise made in the Torah text that you may fare well and have a long life by following the law, by not taking the mother bird with the baby bird, by not breaking the law on Sabbath, is violated before his eyes, which leads him to doubt that sinners get punished and the pious get requited. Elisha deliberately breaks the law as a provocation to God. May lightning strike me down. And God fails the test. By including this story among its many tales about the rabbis' lives, the compilers of the Talmud seem to be expressing confidence about their capacity to reveal the folly of atheism. And yet their attacks on this man are strangely weak and ineffectual, at least to a modern reader, at least to me. First, they defame his parents. His mother, they say, when pregnant with him, ate meat from the burnt offerings of an idolatrous temple. And the food, quote, permeated her innards like venom of a snake. His father, a noble citizen of Jerusalem, was obsessed, they say, with frivolous interests. The sins of the parents, in other words, these texts imply, corrupted the son from birth. Second, the rabbis resort to an otherworldly theology to redeem their God. Elisha, they explain, quote, was unaware how Rabbi Akiva had explained that passage from Deuteronomy, that you may fare well in the world to come, which is wholly good, and have a long life in the world to come, which goes on without end. All of that is a quote from Akiva. In other words, rewards and punishments are indeed a part of the structure of the universe, but they are meted out in the afterlife, not in this life. In making this argument, the rabbis take a major leap from the here and now theology of the Bible, which does not even mention an afterlife. The biblical God lowers the boom on sinners while their sins are being digested. To contend with Elisha's critique, they create an otherworldly Judaism, in which, as another rabbi puts it, all of our world is, quote, but a vestibule before the world to come. This is escapism, probably inevitable for a people who had been devastated in 2 wars against the Roman Empire and had lost their land, their greatest teachers, and hundreds of thousands of their citizens. Cruelly lost them. In these first 2 centuries of the Common Era, when most of the conversations recorded in the Talmud were taking place, otherworldliness was a balm and a prophylactic against atheism. Acher's tale is a piece of what you call theodicy, an attempt to reconcile the belief in a good and all-powerful God with the existence of evil and the suffering it causes. For Acher, having witnessed a living disproof of a Torah text, something's got to give. Either God is not wholly good or wholly powerful, or evil has a righteous purpose and suffering is somehow deserved, or the world has no cosmic moral structure and no God. These possibilities have been part of Jewish theological reckoning over the centuries. In Acher's own period, suffering was commonly explained as the wages of sin. Quote, there is no death without sin, no suffering without transgression, declared the 3rd century's Rabbi Ami in one of the more blunt formulations of this viewpoint in the Talmud, which is from the book called Shabbat. Other theologies, notably in the Jewish mystical tradition, suggested that there might be two contending powers in the universe, God and the Sitra Achara, the other side. Such dualism was opposed throughout the centuries by rabbinical authorities, yet their own insistence on the unity of God implies, unsatisfactorily, that God has a monstrous aspect, a taste for calamity, death, and disaster that is beyond human comprehension. Indeed, the 12th century's Maimonides taught that divine, quote, goodness is simply a trait we ascribe to God, who is, after all, unknowable, but utterly real, says Maimonides. Evil itself is perhaps less real in his view because it is a human product, a correlative of free will. Quote, we suffer because of evils that we have produced ourselves of our own free will, he wrote in his Guide to the Perplexed. Arguments such as these begin to circumscribe the power of God by carving out a badlands, a territory, region that is exclusively a human domain. Contemporary theologians have taken this further in such works as Rabbi Harold Kushner's 1981 bestseller, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Kushner died just a couple of weeks ago, which essentially absolves God of responsibility for human suffering. Quote, I can worship a God who hates suffering but cannot eliminate it, wrote Kushner, more easily than I can worship a God who chooses to make children suffer and die for whatever exalted reason. So Kushner kind of circumscribed the power of God, diminished the power of God to justify worshiping a God. For most atheists, however, these efforts to create a compelling theodicy, explanation of evil, and salvage a belief in God feels tortuous. In the wonderful 1939 novel, As a Driven Leaf, it's called, by Rabbi Milton Steinberg, who assembled the fragmentary material about Elisha ben Avuya into a very rich historical novel called As a Driven Leaf. Acher himself says it's most pointedly with a terrible quiet in his voice. Quote, it is all a lie. There is no reward. There is no judge. There is no judgment, for there is no God, end quote. The seeds of Jewish secularism are thus planted in the Talmud itself. By presenting Acher's heresy and then failing to undermine it convincingly, the compilers of these texts some 15 centuries ago preserved elements of doubt and disbelief that would blossom in modern times. They did so despite being confronted in their own time by a Jewish heresy that had become the dominant Roman faith, Christianity, and by the Theodosian Code, the 5th century codification of Roman law that made Jews into second-class citizens. Rather than enacting a fantasy revenge on all heretics by wiping the Talmud clean of Acher, the other, the rabbis actually chose to grant honor and sustenance to his descendants. His daughter is portrayed after her father's death, petitioning Judah the patriarch, Judah the prince, the rabbinic leader of his era, for material support. Remember Elisha's Torah, not his deeds, she urged Judah, and the heavens punctuate her plea by lapping his bench with flames. These flames shoot down and lap Judah the prince's bench. And that's the story of the atheist in the Talmud. I want to conclude just by playing you a song by John Lennon called God. This is a post-Beatles song by John Lennon. Let me just get it up. Oop, not that. I'll try to simultaneously translate because it might be a little hard to understand. God is a concept by which we measure our pain. I would say also by which we measure our awe, our joy, our many things. God is a concept by which we measure. I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in I Ching. I don't believe in Bible. I don't believe in tarot cards. I don't believe in Hitler. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe in Kennedy. I don't believe in Buddha. I don't believe in mantra. I don't believe in Gita, all these Hindu Vedic stuff. I don't believe in yoga. I don't believe in kings. I don't believe in Elvis. I don't believe in Zimmerman, Bob Dylan. I don't believe in Beatles.
Just believe in me.
I'll fade that out. It goes on a bit, but...
But we know he believed in love. Or so he said. What is the purpose of that?
Of that song?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll tell you my interpretation. This song came out as on his first solo album after the Beatles broke up. Quite a traumatic time in his life. He went into a kind of therapy that involves a lot of screaming, a lot of encountering trauma. And the Beatles were so influential. Everything they did set in motion. You know, when they went and studied transcendental meditation, hundreds of thousands of people started doing transcendental meditation. So I feel like this was a declaration he's making of let go of all of this following, let go of all of these belief systems, and just be real. And I thought it was a very brave song for him to be shooting down all the idols of his time, many of which he helped to erect, including the Beatles.
So why was it brave?
I think wrecking idols is always brave, because people worship idols. They don't like having their idols wrecked.
Two comments. I believe that in the 12th, 13th century Europe, you had the Cathar, who were a religious sect, who believed that God and Satan were equal in power, giving man free will to choose. And the other is, from Marx, religion being the opiate of the people, but everybody forgets the second line of, yet the sigh of the oppressed. That as people become more prosperous, I think religion tends to leave their needs.
Right.
Now, as they suffer, then they have to rely on religion. But take the suffering away, you don't need it.
So I would say two things. One is suffering never goes away.
Well,
Suffering never goes away. So the need for consolation never goes away. Two, much modern progressive religion is much less about what John Lennon says, God is a concept by which we measure our pain. I said it's also a concept by which people measure their awe, their wonder, their joy. They translate God into kind of a cheerleader for the good as opposed to a comforter for the evil. And it doesn't therefore take care of the need for God. It just transmutes it. And much modern theology is all about celebration of the blessings rather than explanation of the suffering. Give him back.
One last thing. You have to separate God from ism. Religions are not godly, because religions create hate throughout history, yet God is supposed to be love.
So I would respond by saying religions don't create hate, people create hate. For great periods of time, for great people of periods of time, religion becomes the vessel. After it's that, it's other things that become the vessel for our capacity for hating one another and hurting one another.
In the name of
just a small correction or
in the name of religion.
Sometimes in the name of class, sometimes in the name of the righteous, and in the name of otherness.
I was raised among a lot of people who were either concentration camps or had lost everybody in their lives to concentration camps and so on. And long afterwards, I thought, and most of them Jewish, and most of them considered themselves Jewish, and very few of them sounded even remotely like atheists. Years later, I thought back and I realized that I wasn't sure what they believed or stopped believing in post-Hitler. But to be honest with myself, they clung to their Jewishness because that's their people. And I remember asking one or two, because I was nosy or curious or whatever you want to call it, do you believe in God? And how do you explain your belief in God when you lost so much, you know? And they said, I think they were saying they were agnostic, that they weren't sure, but they were still calling themselves Jews because they're people and they can't know as people what exactly God is or why God would allow everybody to be killed. And but they just separated from people. So when I look back, I realized some of these people who I thought of as so old-fashioned kind of Jewish were really Jewish, but really not religious. But they might go to synagogue more to honor the dead and to have some hope and a place to commune, rather than people who were religious.
I think it's understood, at least among Jews, that Judaism...
I can speak to that. Just a minute.
That Judaism is the religion of a people. But being Jewish is not a religion. It's used to be a nationalization. It's a civilization, as the Reconstructionists call it. It's a tribe. It's a people. Yeah. And you certainly don't have to practice the religion to feel that belonging. There are many ways of exercising that identity. In the past, it was kind of a lot less voluntary than it is now. You can get away with leaving that identity. In the past, there was no way. It was your language, it was your community, and even in the recent past, Jewish neighborhoods, Jewish jobs, there was like so much more affecting that sense of peoplehood. But yeah, someone said to me on my way in here, how can you be a Jewish atheist? And the answer is, yeah, I'm Jewish and I'm an atheist, you know.
I can speak to that. My father was a Holocaust survivor. He was picked up when he was 20 from Antwerp, and his parents didn't make it, and his sister was also murdered. And he was he was the only one of 2,000 people who were taken from Antwerp in that transport to have survived. And he spoke about it openly and freely, and I grew up that way. So I remember asking him this question, because in Europe at that time, the only kind of Judaism was Orthodox. That was the only kind there was. And so I asked him, the people who survived the camps, what did they do about their sense of God? And he told me that probably half of them came out atheist and half of them came out more devout than ever. And I can imagine we can all make up rules, reasons why you could draw that conclusion. You know, God means for the next afterlife. We don't really understand what God is doing. The Jewish people must have done something terrible. You know, there are all cockamamie reasons why you can come to that conclusion. But he did say that it was pretty much, in his experience, half and half.
Mm-hmm. This is an artwork of mine from years ago in the same book that shows this kind of radiant center, and the words coming out of it are I deny, Adonai, I dunno. The three. I wanted to say that for me, in my writing and in my personal theology, I define religion very broadly. When people are talking about life and death and what should we do with our lives and where is our moral compass and where is those kinds of questions, even if they don't believe in a God, they're talking religion. You know, I always felt like the abortion right, the right to control your own body, should have been proposed as a freedom of religion. Because when you're talking about whether or not to bring a soul to life or not, you're really dealing with your personal orientation towards those fundamental questions. So I give a very broad definition to religion, which enables atheists to say, yeah, I'm religious. I practice thinking about that. The other thing I try to get at, for me, is recognizing that among human beings, there are certain reality principles that you can't deny, or if you deny them, they're going to put out perverse results. And I'd like to come sometime to this group and speak about Jewish economic philosophy. One of the fundamentals of Jewish economic philosophy is the recognition that the stuff we make livelihood from, the sun, the water, the dirt, the minerals, all of these resources on the planet don't belong to anybody. They're our shared reality of being earthlings, right? And the religion expresses it as in the 24th Psalm. The religion says, the earth is the Lord's and all of its fruits. So as an atheist, either I say, that's not meaningful to me, the earth is the Lord's, or I say, what does that mean? And I realize that there's a reality principle. Now, you can deny that reality principle. You could say, well, if I own the property, it's mine. That's true, too, under the law. But there is the larger principle of we all have these resources. Another principle economically is that in order to create anything, in order to come up with an invention, in order to get rich, you're participating in a social activity. You didn't come up with mathematics by yourself. You didn't come up with science by yourself. You didn't build roads to your factory by yourself. You didn't create trucks that could cart the coal. I mean, it's all centuries of human endeavor that enabled you to come up with a brilliant idea that makes you a millionaire. Fine. No one's denying your right to your millions, except Judaism says you have to share the wealth through charitable giving, through tzedakah. Because the reality principle is that economics are social, and the resources are ours. Those are very profound reality principles. When you ignore them, you produce injustice. To me, this is I'm speaking religion now. I'm recognizing when I say reality principles, that's like saying God says da-da. But I think it's an undeniable reality principle that I haven't yet debated with anyone, so maybe they're not. But I'm just trying to give a light on how, as a full-bodied atheist, I nevertheless practice a religion. practice religion?
Carefully defined.
I know that
Carefully defined.
in my case, I'm a Jew. I believe in Judaism. I believe in a higher power. I don't believe that there's some guy, you know, it's a woman, but we know that. And I've been through so much in my life and gotten through it, I feel, because of a higher power, whether it's whoever it is, you know, that there's something to be said, but who, what, where, I have no idea.
Take it a step.
My
Is
God.
it a power that is aware of you? Is it a power that you can commune with? I'm not asking these questions facetiously.
I believe
Yes.
it is. I mean, I've cursed it. I've embraced it. I've you know, ignored it, and I believe that there's something, but what or who or anything, got no clue.
Can I ask, why does God have to make everything better? Like we, you know, or be blamed for that. We believe that God gives you strength to face what you have to face in life. Not that, you know, everything's God's fault. He's going to make it better.
Well, the usual theologies describe an almighty God, a God that sets in motion the world and controls the world, and is not just a doctor of the soul or a cheerleader, but makes things happen. That's the usual theology. I'm not saying you can't develop, you know, like Kushner did. Kushner basically said, God gives you the strength to deal with trouble and sorrow that's going to come your way, that God does not make that sorrow come your way. To me, once I have all these questions of why is there evil in the world, why did God make the world so difficult, and so on, I let go of the God, because
But why is that God's fault? I mean, you have willpower. In other words, people make their own problems a lot. It's not all God's fault. You have willpower.
Oh, I'd like to tie in John Lennon's I Believe in Me with your economic concept that we all own everything. And when I hear somebody proclaim that they're a self-made man or a self-made woman, as you said, yes, you opened the factory, but who built the roads? Who did the advertising? Who supplied your raw materials? This I Believe in Me is good to a point, but it leads to an incredible narcissism that forgets that we are part of a much larger reality.
Hear, hear. And John Lennon's, it's only one song. It ends with this kind of despair, I believe in me, Yoko and me. The song goes on saying the dream is over, you know, go off your way to everybody. Later he wrote a song, Instant Karma, which included the verse, why in the world are we here? Surely not to live in pain and fear. Why in the world are you there when you're everywhere? Come and get your share. It was a totally inviting, community-oriented song, which, you know, coming from the top of the world was quite remarkable. I mean, the Beatles were at the top of the world.
I'd just like to say that it's been said that man has been made, and women, of course, humans have been made in the image of God. So when you talk about sharing everything, it doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to everybody. That's God. You're saying that some people believe that that's God's wish. That's man's wish as well. And if you believe in God, and if you believe you're in the image of God, then it's your duty to do things for others, not just yourself.
So, first of all, the idea that human beings are made in the image of God has been abused into the earth is our domain. You know, a lot of modern scientists and others would come back at you with, yeah, elephants are also made in the image of God. Honeybees are made in the image of God. Trees are made in the image of God. Life is what we're talking about here. And the continuity of evolution and the interconnectedness of species, because they all evolved. And I agree with you that the impulse to community and to helping and to recognizing our interdependence is very strong in human beings. We also have selfishness. We also have, I like my kids more than I like your kids, and I always will. And the purpose, at least within Judaism, that's all I can speak to, on some levels is to discipline you, to train you to go to the one impulse and to quiet down the other impulse. That's what the training of human beings is.
To civilize you.
To civilize us, so to speak.
I have a couple of conversations to recount to you, and they illustrate the fascinating ways to me that people come to a belief in God. It is so personal. You know, we talk of religion as great big institutions. I wonder about that, because I wonder whether for every religious person there is their own personal definition of what that is. One conversation was that I had a friend, a wonderful friend, who was a devout Muslim. We were very good friends. And she said one day, she said, you know, I don't get it. She said, you are such a kind and decent and good person. How is it that you don't believe in God? And she meant it quite sincerely, and so I answered it quite sincerely. And I said, well, the reason that I don't believe in God is that I don't see a lot of evidence for God, but I see a lot of evidence for no God. And she said, isn't that interesting? She said, wherever I look, I see the penumbra of God. Totally different worldview, totally different worldview. And the other conversation was a much simpler one. This was a Rebbitzin, a rabbi's wife, who told me that she knew that God existed and she had an irrefutable proof. Her proof was that Mozart lived. Because of Mozart, God had to exist. Everybody has their reasons.
We've got time for one or two more, so if you're thinking, think fast.
I think Western religion defines God as this all-good, all-powerful, all-wise entity. Okay? Now, each of us defines good, wise, and powerful differently. Hence, yes, a man crying, this he believes is a sign of weakness. She believes a sign of strength. I mean, we all have different definitions. So, instead of God creating man in his image, man creates God in man's image. We create our own gods, and we, and this is how we see it, because we define it differently. Everybody defines God differently.
All right, anybody, last question? Okay, Larry, thank you. It's been wonderful. You've enjoyed it.
Check out my books, please.
What's Larry's last name?
if you want, check out Larry's books. If you are leaving at this point, please do so quickly and quietly. If you're gonna stay, the kitchen kind of screwed up the challah, so we have rolls. No, we have, it's, the challah is tsuras, you know, it's like they need to find a place to keep it so they can find it. That's the problem. They have it, but they don't know where they put it. So, yeah, say a bracha. Anyway, we'll light the candles, we'll do the challah, and we'll pass out the wine. We've got grape juice if you need, and to everybody, give us a second to change around. Barbara, are you staying? I know, are you staying? Okay, then you walk, I'll stay outside with mine, it's okay.
Stay, Marion. It's just wine and bread.
No, it's still,
What about Megan? What about
It's
Megan?
not holy.
it's a roll.
I'm saying the bracha is for the
That's the
roll.
way to go.
Okay?
I know, there's God, but no God of this morning. But the quest for,
Does anyone need the words for the brachas for the candlelight? Does anyone need? Okay. Anybody need the cheat sheet?
This is why. This is why.
Okay, we'll do candle lighting first.
Instead of
Joe, did you know you grabbed the grape juice?
Yeah, I know. I'm telling them.
Oh, okay.
I've got both.
Okay.
I've got both. This is wine. Yes, this is wine, and this is grape juice. So far, I'm not selling the grape juice. You have wine.
Okay, everybody. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedoshanu b'mitzvah asav v'tzivanu l'chagner shel Shabbos. Amen.
6 cents a mile from Main Street. Okay, thank you. Okay, excellent. Okay, we're not leaving yet.
She's got it. Joe's got it.
This is wine.
You can do this, Phyllis, later. We got to get this done. Grape juice is.
This is grape juice. Joe. This is wine. Joe, try it.
No, I need grape juice.
Joe. This is wine and this is grape juice.
Sweet.
Wine
Okay, the bracha on the
wine and
semi-challah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Amen. Either of you want grape juice? That's what you've got on this tray. Yeah, there is wine. Do you want to put that back and get? I can get you wine. You can have both.
Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Amen.
that's the great.
This is grape juice.
We have a lot of people.
Well, I didn't have wine, so I can have wine.
Tastes like grape juice. I have it too.
Yeah, the big one.
There's lots more wine.
Is that wine or beer?
If they could, when you
Yeah. Right.
Barbara.
Let's move on. Let's move on.
What does your walk look like?
We have another one.
That's her?
Just put it on here. Hold on.
Because I was saying there's two seconds.
Lola. That's It's yours.
Oh, thank you.
Who's the nameless one? Who's the nameless one?
That's Ann.
Even though it says it's James Gunn.
You're the nameless one? Where? Oh, it's hidden.
My question comes from
I can't provide you that,
Right.
but I know there's more.
That's striking there aren't many other vocabularies for talking about the really meaningful life. And that's unfortunate, and a lot of folks like you and me exempt ourselves from those discussions because we don't have the, because we don't want to participate in the religious vocabulary. And that's why I said earlier how I've expanded what I call religious. It's like when you're discussing these fundamental things in meaningful ways, you're practicing religion. You don't need God for it. Sure. Amazing how many people are still Catholic after all this stuff about the church.
I like this one. Next week we're meeting in the park at 3 o'clock for the Sephardic, the Ladino singing. And then it's from 3 to 5. They'll sing and we'll talk. We have 4 to 5 and 3 to 4. Because in the pack it's 3.
You have 3 to 4 and then 4 to 5.
Right,
Not
all there.
Next Friday.
All in the pack.
All in the pack.
All in the pack.
So why not call it 3 to 5?
2 women
You also did a lot of interpreting in a way that atheists could relate to spirituality. That's important. I think that's what we're supposed to do. Anything about the creation of the universe, you're a physicist. I mean, the fact that light travels at 186,000 miles a second and it's the fastest thing in the world. I cannot make sense of it, I cannot make mathematics of it, and I'm awestruck by that reality. That begins to become a religious feeling, so to speak. No matter how scientific it is, you can
stay and answer questions and do music and whatnot. Yeah.
Good, when was that going to be? No,
Yes.
I didn't follow up. I get the notices.
In the pack.
I will send out big letters next week about how Shalom is supposed to be in the pack.
And that would come up here.
So it'll be great big red letters that people
The
can
rest of the,
4 to 5. Good.
just over there. Don't get it.
That's the link you want.
It would go in cars.
Going to the tax.
So it's still,
Where is
This, I read to you from this book.
Back at
Pink coat, June.
I didn't know that.
It's a heavy book, but not that heavy. Right, she's got a basket in her walker. Yeah, you do. You know, if you have it now, I'll take it. If you don't, $10. Bargain. $30 usually. But up to my next concert on the 30th, you know, $10? Yeah, cash would be preferable.
years ago. With computers. Well, they want to put us into
A question mark instead of a period or an exclamation. I'm a question mark by far when it comes to that, because the history, if you're not a question mark about that stuff, after the history of that stuff, then you're really...
Yeah, that's the week in the back. There are 2 women professionals who are coming.
when we were teachers, we
I don't know if you're asleep or not. But, yeah, I'm just kidding.
going from tier 1 to tier 2.
And then they're presenting in the pack, singing, doing performance, and then from 4 to 5 they're staying and showing space, and they're doing question and answer musical songs, so you can join in.
I don't hold, so I don't hold. Right, so I don't hold those in attention. I don't think the first is true.
So when does this go into effect?
In my case, I don't think that Jews are well served by nationalism. They should have remained an international people. But we would have gotten it in the neck.
I've got an answer. That's good. I've got to go.
And that's what it's denying.
So they know, I don't think January, but and in January, see now they have to give us
I'm just reading a great book about colonial times. You know, the Iroquois conquered other people in the 1600s. After smallpox wiped out about 50 of their people, they had 3 decades of war where they adopted 50% of the people who they conquered and they killed 50% of the people they conquered. They were not nice, they were conquering people. They had a definite sense of what land was and whose it was and who paid tribute to whom.
and the
Anyway, I know you, Carl. I know you from the kindling world and the Jewish parents world, don't I?
Yes.
So did you buy our book?
Chip.
Yes, I have to. I owe him the money though.
I'll remind you next time. We'll be here on the last Friday, on the 30th. You can have the book.
Okay. Now let me ask you, what about Wendy and Alan?
What about them?
Oh, this weighs a ton.
Here.
Yes.
No, don't take that one. That's your fault.
lightweight.
And
So we got Wendy and Alan.
by doing this, is another nail in
Wendy and I are talking to Duck and recording, so maybe something will come of it.
I like that.
Yeah.
They're great.
Unless there's somebody in
Just saw them a couple of days ago.
Well, thank you so much.
Puffin was a major funder of Jewish parents for a long time. Really saved. Yeah. Harry Rosenstein. Yes. Yes.
And I brought him things.
Uh-huh.
He must be older
He's
than
gone
me.
now.
I
He's
didn't
gone.
know them.
Yeah.
But tell them, when you're ready with your visitors and stuff, let's have lunch or
Oh,
dinner. We have
they
not
totally
had lunch.
Yes.
enabled my last 4 or 5 years of Jewish parents to be not working, but they gave us that much money. It was fantastic.
So, let's
A red is a communist, a pinko is a doubting communist.
Just curious.
lightweight communist.
The lightweight coming.
Thank God.
Thank you so much. You
Good.
know, you brought to light so much.
Good.
I really, really, really appreciate what you had to say and sharing it all. That's you know, that's not easy.
Yeah. Well, it's fun for me. I get to do it again. After all, I am retired.
Just a little late. I have to walk my dog and juice her and come back.
Shall I dump
Okay,
this?
see you soon.
Shall I dump this?
Almost as good as a guitar. Love it.
Oh,
Looking
okay.
forward to it. Gonna bring it up within $10.
I'll remind you at our concert, you know.
Yeah, cover with me. I won't forget. I won't because I have a book here. Thank you.
Okay, enjoy it.
She did much more than she had to do.
speaking up.
Yeah. You know, yesterday there was so much misinformation running around that room. It was awful. But she did what she had to do. And, you know, it may die a slow death, but it may die a slow death, but there was so much
Now the
misinformation.
other thing is fear.
So,
Fear.
just a minute. You just did the classic, like, how communists used to treat socialists as lightweight, as opposed to communism has been such a fucking disaster that how can you not rethink it? How can you not back off enough to say the dictatorship of the proletariat is really a problem?
No, it's not. See, I blame it all on Stalin. And I blame it all on Trotsky for not having the balls to kill Stalin.
And you don't think that the ideology gave rise to the possibility? Every country that has defined itself that way has slaughtered people. Every single one of them.
And
All because of Stalin? And you can blame Mao, and you can blame...
Wait a minute, but every country, capitalism has slaughtered people.
Not in the same way. Not in the same way. You know, you get the death penalty here. You get the death penalty here. You have 20 years on death row, or 15 years on death row. With Stalin, you get a bullet to the head within a week of your first accusation.
Okay, that's Stalinism.
It's Maoism. It's Kampuchea.
But look at it this way. How can? But look at it this way. Mao. And I'm going to take China today, in 75 years.